Hello everyone, Clown Decade, etc, etc. There's something more important to talk about today though, before we get into the main topic of the video, and that is, it is election day in England for many county councils, along with some mayoral offices, and it is imperative that you go out and vote Reform. If you want any sort of decent alternative to the Tories, and if you gave your trust to Labour especially and found it to be broken, the next best thing is Reform, who are there effectively to show you that things can actually be done differently and well. So, if I were you, I'd go out and vote for them. Anyway, that's enough shilling of that for now. Let's get into the main topic of the video. And that is that the Independent Office for Police Conduct has concluded, after a thorough review of all evidence, that the case continues to meet the threshold which requires Sergeant Martin Blake to attend a misconduct hearing. At the end of our investigation into the fatal shooting of Chris Kaba, we determined that there was sufficient evidence to indicate he may have breached the police professional standards regarding his use of force, and therefore had a case to answer for gross misconduct. This is absolutely absurd, for a couple of reasons, because this has come out following his acquittal in October 2024, and the IOPC had reviewed their original decision, thoroughly assessing the evidence examined during the trial to determine whether the weight or substance of that evidence changed the position, and they have also carefully considered representations from Mr. Kaba's family, the Met and Sergeant Blake. In other words, despite the fact, as they acknowledge, Martin Blake, the man who unfortunately shot and killed Chris Kaba as he was trying to run other police officers over after being blockaded down a street, despite the fact he had been found innocent and acquitted of all murder charges, they have still decided that shooting Chris Kaba while he is trying to ram into other officers is misconduct. I don't know what the hell they're expecting firearms officers to do when they are being rammed by a car that is also involved with firearm offences literally the day before. Police aren't supermen, they are simply acting with the information that they have and with the situation that they are in. If I was being rammed by someone with a car, I would have no foibles about shooting them in the head through the windscreen. Anyway, the threshold which the IOPC must apply is set out in legislation and Home Office guidance. Again, this was all done under the Tories, by the way. As far as I'm aware, Labour have not touched this stuff. It is a lower test than that for criminal proceedings, that does make sense, which serve a different purpose. The guidance is also clear that where the case to answer test is met, that was bad English, there must be compelling reasons not to direct misconduct proceedings, and on this basis we have concluded that there remains a case to answer and misconduct proceedings must go ahead, as we have no basis to withdraw original decision. While we have determined that Sergeant Blake still has a case to answer and must therefore attend a misconduct hearing, it is only a police disciplinary panel which can decide whether misconduct is proven or not. That is not the role of the IOPC. And this is one of the massive issues with all these quangos. They have to be made to look busy rather than do anything useful. And the problem is, if they looked into this and said, yeah, there's no point in a hearing, it doesn't look like they've been busy. It looks like they've wasted time, in fact. And so they're always going to lean towards having to have a misconduct hearing. And to be honest with you, they don't really explain how the threshold has been reached. However, the director of the IOPC, Amanda Rowe, had this to say. We understand the impact this decision will have on Chris Kaba's family and Sergeant Blake and acknowledge the significant public interest in this case, particularly among our black capital B communities, firearms officers and the wider policing community. This is a decision we have taken based on examining all evidence, views of all parties, and by applying the threshold set out in legislation and guidance which govern our work. Again, they haven't explained what threshold has been met here, they just keep saying it has been met. I would love to know what the details are. The legal test for deciding whether there is a case to answer is low. Is there sufficient evidence upon which, on the balance of probabilities, a disciplinary panel could make a finding of misconduct? This has been met and therefore we need to follow legal processes. I mean, you could find misconduct in every shooting, I would imagine. Nobody is perfect. Point of the matter is, did he shoot someone because of an immediate threat or danger to the public or the police? The answer is yes. But it's all this legalese stuff as well. We follow the legal process, the balance of probabilities. Yeah, there's probably misconduct. If we say he doesn't need a disciplinary hearing, we could get in legal trouble, don't you know? Well, yeah, this is why I want the law completely changed and why, yet again, I'm going to be voting Reform whenever I can. because they sort this out. We appreciate that the Home Office is carrying out a review of the legal test for the use of force in misconduct cases. However, we must apply the law as it currently stands. I completely understand that, which is why I'm always quite hesitant to actually blame the people making these decisions, because at the end of the day, we do have ridiculous laws, and I would not be shocked if the Home Office managed to do this. But again, who put these laws in place? It was the Tories, because we've had a load of laws and guidelines put in post-2010. The next stage of the process for the Met to arrange the disciplinary hearing. It's in the interest of all parties that the hearing is arranged as quickly as possible. Incredible. Anyway, they give you a handy timeline of events as well, and this sort of thing just annoys me as well. So, September 2022, Chris Kaba's shot and killed. IOPC begin an independent investigation. And on the 9th of September, just 4 days after, a homicide investigation is announced into Chris Kaba's death. And then in March 2023, the investigation concludes and decision made to refer a file of evidence to the Crown Prosecution Service to consider whether Blake should be prosecuted. The IOPC provisional decision that he had a case to answer for gross misconduct and should face disciplinary proceedings shared with the Met. Then in April, Met agree with our case to answer decision. IOPC then confirm its decision that Sergeant Blake should face a misconduct hearing. Again, this is all because they legally can't say no. Then in September, the CPS announced its decision to charge Martin Blake with murder. It's incredible that that happened as well. This all happened under the Tories, bear in mind. A police officer does his job, and all of a sudden he has to answer in court for it. It's incredible. Then in October of 2024, over a year later, Martin Blake is acquitted following a trial at the Old Bailey. The IOPC begin reviewing the disciplinary decision, applies to the court for the trial transcripts, and asks for representation on behalf of the Met officers and Chris Kaba's family about the disciplinary proceedings. And not only that, but the funniest part of all this is that 5th of September 2022, Black Lives Matter was just past its peak, really, in Britain. It was the biggest news story about the death of a black man since Mark Duggan, I'd say, which caused the 2011 riots. And what we've seen since in October, say, I remember covering it, Black Lives Matter just do not have the political power that they used to have. Nobody really cared. Barely anyone cares about Black History Month anymore, apart from a few black MPs, and that's pretty much it. It's just mental. December 2024 to January 2025, the court transcripts are received, and then in February, representations from the parties involved are received. The Met's view is that the IOPC should withdraw its direction. Mr. Kaba's family's view is that the gross misconduct hearing should go ahead anyway. Incredible. Sergeant Blake's legal team declined to provide representation, but refer the IOPC to the trial transcripts. Yeah, that's what I'd do, I think. We then seek independent legal advice from a senior counsel. And then, obviously, today, the IOPC confirmed that the case continues to meet the threshold which requires Sergeant Blake to attend a misconduct hearing. It's incredible. Who's the only people saying that? The King's Counsel, and also Chris Kaba's family. Of course they're going to. Chris Kaba's family, unfortunately, I don't think will be able to appreciate the fact that, frankly, Chris Kaba was a criminal, was putting people in danger, and was effectively putting himself in a position where the only outcome was him getting shot and risking his life. He risked his life, he lost it. I don't see why this needs to go further. This never should have gone to trial. The IOPC should have investigated, found that effectively Blake didn't do anything wrong. Why do I say that? Because the Met don't think he did anything wrong, his other firearms officers don't think he did anything wrong, and anyone who's seen the video and the details of the case don't particularly think he did anything wrong. It's rare that firearms officers discharge their weapons in Britain. It happens like twice a year that someone's fatally shot. And yet every time it seems to happen, unless it's a direct terrorist attack happening, then someone ends up having to go through multiple courtrooms and multiple disciplinaries, despite the fact he shouldn't have to do any of this. And back in 2022, when this was going to trial, and the Home Office wouldn't do anything about it, the Met couldn't do anything about it, a lot of firearms officers just said, well, I'm not risking my livelihood to be able to protect the city using the most direct and violent means, if it means that I'm going to effectively have to ruin my life for 2 years for doing my job, which is perfectly reasonable. But the law doesn't care, the IOPC are just following the law. This all, at the end of the day, comes back to the civil service and Parliament, the two biggest issues we have at the moment. The civil service being the bigger one because at least we have a say in Parliament. And at the moment, obviously, we've got Labour in there, and they're not doing an awful lot right. They are doing some right, obviously, but I don't see them making any changes to make sure that our firearms officers can actually do their job, and I think that's embarrassing. And luckily, there is a backlash to all this yet again, because Met police officers have criticised a nonsensical ruling to bring gross misconduct proceedings against the marksman cleared of murder in Chris Kaba. Martin Blake fired a single shot at unarmed Kaba when he feared the rapper would kill officers as he tried to ram his way out of a hard stop in South London in September 2022. Armed police had pursued Kaba after his blue Audi Q8 was linked to a shooting in Brixton the previous night. Again, they didn't know he was unarmed, he's just in a car related to a firearms incident. You're going to make some assumptions there. Kaba, a gang member, I think that's more relevant than the rapper part, but whatever, who opened fire on a rival in a packed nightclub days before the incident, died in hospital. No firearms were found in the car. In October, a jury at the Old Bailey in London unanimously acquitted Blake of the murder, but the IOPC reviewed its original decision and announced on Wednesday that Blake still has a case to answer and must attend a gross misconduct hearing. Scotland Yard made strong representations that Blake should not face further action due to the extensive evidence tried and tested at court, but has been told to arrange a disciplinary hearing as quickly as possible. Kaba's family welcomed the decision, of course they did, and said Blake, who is believed to have been promoted, should lose his job. Nope, he is a hero and should absolutely receive a medal. Anyway, the article goes into how basically everyone involved with the police thinks this is ridiculous. The Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, also thinks that it is very disappointing that we have to go through these proceedings, but what's the government doing? Well, the government has tabled an amendment to the Crime and Policing Bill which will create a presumption of anonymity for firearms officers in criminal court proceedings. I think that's absolutely reasonable, given that Martin Blake is, well, he'll be wanted by a few people, by a few gangs in London, I'd imagine, for killing one of their gang members. Keir Starmer said to have confidence in the police watchdog, but also stressed that the verdict of the jury should be respected. The Office for the Prime Minister said, it's a decision for the IOPC that is obviously independent of the government, but the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister are clear that the verdict of the jury of the criminal trial who found the officer not guilty must be respected, and more generally we are committed to ensuring that the police have got the confidence that they need to do their incredibly difficult and dangerous job. Again, this is classic Labour, and to be honest, it's been classic Tories for some years now, which has been, oh, independent. We've given away all the power to these independent bodies. It's up to their decision, so I trust them. And no, a good and decent Prime Minister and government would be saying, no, this is ridiculous. We will change the law so that they can't abuse this power again. And the Home Office effectively refuses to comment, though it does say, cases in the police conduct system often take too long and the government is taking action to speed up the process. Great. So we'll have more people going in for gross misconduct when they've done nothing wrong, but at least it will be quick. Incredible. I suppose one of the biggest issues we are seeing with all these quangos and the independence from the government is that when they make decisions that are obviously not in the spirit of the law that has been passed by previous governments or current governments, then you just get the standard, well, we can't really say anything on it because they're supposed to be independent. And this was the whole idea of having quangos and massively increasing their power. It was so that Parliament could get their paychecks effectively, make basic decisions, and then not really make any decisions because the civil service, the quangos, make all the recommendations that they just read off and then choose the one that they want. Dominic Cummings has explained this for some time, and it's actually possible for Parliament to get the power and influence it had back. It's just going to take a man with a chest. And that's why you should vote reform. But another reason that we have some ridiculous public support for the IOPC's decision, mainly obviously from Chris Kaba's family and anyone who remotely thinks Black Lives Matter still exists, is that they will just always take the side of the criminal. I mean, in the recent council elections, I've seen a load of leftists try and defend fly tipping. They just always take the side of crime and, well, effectively, bad people. For example, in December of last year, a knifeman was shot dead by police, and after 5 hours of standoff on Christmas Eve, he was described as a friendly guy who just had his demons. West Mercia police were called to Thornhope Close in Redditch, Worcestershire, at 2 p.m. after paramedics raised significant concerns for the safety of a 39-year-old man. The man, who was alone, was said to have been armed with a knife. A police negotiator tried to defuse the situation. Officers are believed to have discharged a taser before a police marksman opened fire at 7:40 p.m. The man, who is yet to be named, was pronounced dead just after 8 p.m. One of his friends at the scene on Christmas Day said he was really friendly, nice guy, had his demons. I've never once seen him cause trouble in the area. When it happened, everybody was out here in shock. He wouldn't have harmed anybody. A knife was recovered from the scene. Investigators said West Mercia referred itself to the police watchdog, the IOPC, which confirmed it had opened an independent investigation. No doubt misconduct will ensue. It said it had made contact with the man's family to express condolences and explain the involvement. But this is the thing. There just never seems to be any appreciation that the police won't know this guy, and him flailing a knife about and not diffusing the situation with the police, and after being tased, still trying to attack them, presumably, and then getting shot. There seems to be no appreciation that the police did everything they could to actually avoid shooting the guy, and that because he's nice, the police effectively shouldn't have shot him. To be fair, I don't think his friend is necessarily saying that. However, the way that these articles are written and the way the headline is put out, it's always oh, this was a nice guy and this shouldn't have happened. That's how it comes across at first. And this is what leads to people supporting Black Lives Matter and saying defund the police, even though the Tories basically did that for 14 years. Anyway, the article goes into the other two incidents of 2024 where there was a fatal shooting. On January 30, a Metropolitan marksman fired 2 shots in a property in Southwark, South London. Bryce Hodgson, 30, died of gunshot wounds to the neck and chest. The police were called after Hodgson tried to force his way into a bedroom armed with a crossbow, knife, sword and a hatchet. He was packing. Investigators said he knew at least one of the occupants. Hodgson was a convicted stalker who had been banned from entering the street where he was killed. Court documents later revealed. Naturally, these police officers did not have to go through court and did not have a misconduct hearing. How much that has to do with the fact Bryce Hodgson probably was not, let's say, a gang member, probably has something to do with it, doesn't it? Anyway, Joel Stenning, 29, died in hospital on August 15, 4 days after being shot by a Surrey police marksman in Woking. Independent investigators said police received a report of an altercation during which a man is seen carrying a firearm in the Knapp Hill area before he entered a property. Police ordered Stenning to come to the door empty-handed, but he emerged pointing a weapon, and a firearm officer let off a single shot. Again, this is the other thing about UK firearms officers. They're not like the police where they mag dump, which I understand the need to mag dump sometimes. They're using semi-automatic fire, firing only 1 or 2 shots, as they are attempting to incapacitate, not necessarily kill. But obviously sometimes they are in situations where they have no choice but to incapacitate in areas that are risking killing said person, in, say, the head with Chris Kaba, which might be where the misconduct hearing is put in place. Why was he shot in the head? Well, because he only saw his head. May very well be the answer, but you didn't see massive protests about these people being killed by the police, despite the fact that they were killed under pretty similar circumstances, in that they were not exactly complying with the police and were using deadly weapons against the police. Anyway, I think that's enough depressing stories about being a police officer today. All that kneeling to Black Lives Matter back in 2020 probably didn't do much good to them. In fact, all it's done is embolden Black Lives Matter and effectively made Black Lives Matter demands law. And we're seeing the results of it, and it's made their job much worse and much harder. So thank you for that, Met Police. Though I do still feel sorry for the firearms officers and anyone on the side of Martin Blake. Right, I think with that is everything I have for you for today. So obviously go out and vote. That is the most important thing you can do, and make sure to vote reform if you are having an election, obviously. And then next up, do catch the stream tonight, where I'll be streaming the first in a series of the playthrough of Subnautica. I will be doing that weekly on Thursdays from now on, so do give it a look. Laughing at the Guardian returns Saturday as well, so do look forward to that too. Hopefully we'll have much to celebrate with the result of the elections. If you want to help out the channel, do subscribe, leave a like, and leave a comment. Those are free and easy ways to help me out in the algorithm, etc, etc. Do also become a member or leave super chats and super thanks. Those are direct and very, very appreciated ways to help the channel too. Right, with that, that's everything I had for you for today. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.